30 seconds to put your
Thanks, Cathal. Minister, poverty still remains to be a massive plight on this state, and unfortunately this government has done little, if anything, to address the serious problem of poverty. In October last year, I introduced a piece of legislation which would see the establishment of a social welfare commission bill. So I just want to ask you of your views of the need for the social welfare commission bill to tackle the serious problem of poverty, and would you make a statement on the issue?
Thanks very much for your cooperation, Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Deputy Brady. The legislation, Chair, that is referred to, which is sponsored by the Deputy, seeks to, amongst other things, establish a commission to monitor and to make recommendations on social welfare rates at least once a year. And while I genuinely welcome the Deputy's engagement on the issue, the establishment of a commission, its composition and indeed its parameters and its terms of reference would need to be genuinely carefully considered. Any change to the current process of setting social welfare rates of payment, including the establishment of a commission, needs to be considered in the overall policy and budgetary context. And this would include taking into account what our stakeholders' views are, the potential costs, policy alignment and the administration of any proposed system and the alleviation of poverty. And I think, as the Deputy is aware, the Roadmap for Pensions Reform, which was published last year, commits this government and all future governments to examine and develop proposals to set a formal benchmark target of 34% of average earnings for the state pension contributory. And it also states that a process will be instituted whereby future changes in pension rates of payments are explicitly linked to changes in average wages and prices. And my department is currently considering options, including your suggestion to progress this commitment. In this context, the Department has consulted with a range of stakeholders, as required under Section 19 of the Social Welfare Pensions and Civil Registration Bill of 2018, on the issue of examining ways in which social welfare rates are currently and in the future determined. And the feedback from this consultation has been considered, and it will help us to inform our development in the approach to benchmarking and indexation. And in order to further discussion on the issue, I have proposed that it would be considered at our department's pre-budget forum in July, which I know you'll all be invited to, but I hope you'll attend, because we also will welcome the views of all political parties, but really, most importantly, not to be disrespectful to political parties, is the stakeholders, and there are many under the umbrella of our department, and what their views and what their wishes and ambitions would be.
Thanks. Full marks even around 2 minutes are on time. Deputy, 1 minute.
Thanks, Cathal. Well, Minister, you know there's 760,000 people in this state living below the poverty line. Children under the age of 16 years of age make up nearly 24% of that. There's over 100,000 people in this state who get up early in the morning and go to work who are still in poverty. And this government is not serious about addressing that. And I say that because the Action Plan for Social Inclusion, Minister, it's out of date. And we still don't see a new action plan. So how can we actually tackle the problem of poverty without that action plan? Now, the piece of legislation that I brought forward, Minister, I've met with the stakeholders that you say we need to take their views into account, and they're all broadly in support of the need for this commission. Absolutely, we need to carefully look at the composition of that commission, and I outlined that in the piece of legislation that I brought forward, and I think it could be based on the low pay commission. There is the need for it, Minister. We need to get serious about tackling the massive problem of poverty, and this is a key way of doing it, that we take the politics out of setting the rates of social welfare right across the board, and that the serious issue of poverty is tackled once and for all.
Thank you very much for your cooperation, Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Chair. Deputy, I suppose I'm happy to be able to say that the poverty rates in this country are genuinely coming down, and they're because we've made changes in the last number of budgets to specifically target the groups of people who are most at risk. And we're talking about lone parents, we're talking about people with disabilities, we're talking about larger families, particularly where they have children over 12 years of age, and all of those issues have been addressed. And thankfully, the Silk latest data has shown that the poverty rates have dropped by significantly 2%. Now, we still have a tremendous amount of people who are within the percentages of where they are living, close to or on the poverty line, for argument's sake, and we will continue to work to make sure that we will drive all of our payments towards those people who are most in need. And so for you to say that the policies that we've employed for the last number of years, and particularly the last 2 progressive budgets from this department, which again have been supported by every single member in this House without exception, are not working, I think is genuinely a little bit unfair. But you're pushing an open door with me. There's no need to fight with me with regard to indexation. I try and say it as often as I can, and it is something genuinely that I want to do. So we're kind of on the same page, I hope.
Final comment, Deputy Brady.
I hope we are on the same page. And look, I mean, one person living in poverty is one person too many. And look, the fact that we have 760,000 of our citizens living below the poverty line. There's a target set by your own government to lift 95,000 children out of poverty by 2020. And we need to be serious about that, Minister. And I can only take you at your word. But when we don't have a plan, I mean, the action plan for social inclusion, where is it? Where is the roadmap to lifting our citizens out of poverty? And I firmly believe, and I genuinely welcome that you are seriously looking at it, the establishment of a social welfare commission. Now, we can call it what we want, but I think we genuinely need to take the politics out of setting social welfare rates and be serious about tackling poverty where we can, and we can through the setting of social welfare rates. So, Minister, I asked you to sit down with me a number of weeks ago, and I know we had agreed, dates, and unfortunately it didn't happen. So can we please do that? Because I genuinely want to progress this. I see huge positive benefits. All of the stakeholders agree we need to move this forward. So can we please sit down and speak about moving this forward?
Final comment from the Minister.
Thank you. As I said in a previous reply, Deputy, that we will be discussing this at the pre-budget forum, and as I said, you're very, very welcome to come, as indeed all of the political parties are, to give us their input. But what I will say to you is that we don't necessarily need a commission to take the politics out of indexing. We need an algorithm and something that we all agree in that will set the rates. It may need to be within a commission, it may not need to be, but that needs to be explored between ourselves and the stakeholders over the next couple of months. We do currently have a policy of social inclusion. The one that I'm working on at the moment to release, and hopefully it will be released in the next number of weeks before the summer recess. The final, I suppose, chapter of that development of that policy was our forum that we held with all of our stakeholders in the Aviva last week. And so I don't do stuff. I think our department, long before I ever got here, has a really determined view of consultation, and they have a height of respect for our stakeholders, as indeed our stakeholders do with us. There's no point in us devising and designing a social inclusion strategy for the next 5 years that does not uphold the policies and the wishes and the aims of the people who are working on the ground, and that's what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks.